Well, thank you, Nancy, for being here. Thank you for your time. Professor Nancy Krieger teaches social epidemiology in the Department of Social and Behavioral Sciences in Harvard School of Public Health. Also, she is a director of interdisciplinary concentration on women, gender, and health at the Harvard School of Public Health. Very well-known epidemiologist that has developed the field of ecosocial epidemiology, also a scientist that has kept strong links with Latin American research and epidemiology, and with the works of Latin American scholars that have also proposed theoretical and methodological innovations in the science of epidemiology. Thank you so much, Nancy. It's a pleasure to have you here. And well, if I messed up something, you can tell us anything you would like the people to know about you.
Thank you, and it's an honor to be invited to be part of your proceedings. And I also very much appreciate how you've made it possible for me to participate by Skype, since it wasn't possible for me to come down to Ecuador during the time of your conference. So I'm honored and delighted to be able to participate in this way.
Okay, thanks. As you know, Universidad Andina of Ecuador and Universidad Nacional of Colombia have promoted an international continuing doctoral seminar in the theory of epidemiology and the contributions of critical epidemiology to the innovation of public health research and postgraduate teaching. This activity has been enriched by the participation of researchers from a dozen different universities of Latin America, North America, and Europe. As in your case, as professor of social epidemiology of the Department of Social and Behavioral Sciences of Harvard School of Public Health, in the realm of hard science, health science, as defined by positivist, the trail quantitative mainstream epidemiology, what would be the importance and special significance of this international encounter promoted by innovative scientists coming from the scientific tradition of critical thinking, striving to expand the transformative potential of epidemiology and reframing the concepts, instruments, and scope of hard epidemiology?
So I think it's wonderful to have a conference that is focusing on the theories and ideas that drive the questions we ask in epidemiology about what really explains population distributions of health, disease, and well-being, and that helps us understand the methods we need to use to answer these questions. To me, the issue in part is positivism, but it's also fundamentally how we understand health in populations and what are the societal determinants in ecological context of these patterns. To have a framework like critical epidemiology offers that looks at social processes, looks at questions of oppression and exploitation, looks at the relationships between classes of people, but also people divided in this way in relation to their environment, meaning their ecology, meaning the natural world that we are part of, even as we also transform it, is critically important. Because if the questions we need answered are those about what shapes the current moment of the distributions of health, we need to put that moment in context. Critical thinking helps us in that manner. Any science needs to have its theories as well as its methods to be able to come up with causal explanations and test them. So to me, the value of the kind of conference that you're having, asking people to come together, to think about what frames, in terms of theory, the questions being asked, to think about what's being considered to be an important topic of research, particularly around health inequities within as well as between countries, and to think about what kinds of methods are needed, quantitative as well as qualitative, in different forms to actually answer the questions we're seeking to ask in a way that will ultimately provide knowledge that's actionable, meaning that we can change the conditions in which we live so as to promote health equity.
Mm-hmm. well, the work of different Latin American epidemiologists made possible since the late 30s. The advent of modern 20th century critical epidemiology. For instance, Paredes and Allende initiated in the 30s the rigorous application of political economy in the understanding of health inequity and the people's health. Laurel applied critical epidemiology to the understanding of the epidemiological effects of capitalism, commodification in 1977, and later to the transformation of occupational epidemiology. Braille contributed since 1977 with the systematical proposition of the categories of social determination, of health, and of subsumption of the natural and individual biological phenomena in the social to overcome the paradigm of causality and reframe the notion of environmental determination. Almeida developed the ethno-social theory of modes of living, etc. What, in your opinion, has been the importance of early pioneering innovations and contributions of Sword and the sound critical health science they have made possible in contemporary research, many times overlooked by the mainstream epidemiology of the North, for the development of a new epidemiological paradigm?
So, in my sense, the work of many different Latin American scholars has been very, very important in the work of public health and collective health, both in the theory, in the research conducted, and in the practice. And that's true not only in epidemiology, that's true in health systems and many other components. I think what's very gratifying is to understand what the connections are between the threads of critical epidemiology in Latin America with different counterparts in both the United States, Canada, and Europe, for example, and Europe with obviously many countries, just as Latin America is many countries. So I think that you'll find in each of these different contexts, different groups contesting dominant ideas, predominantly biomedical, that are framed in understanding the body as machine, that are framed in looking at only individual level phenomena to understand what causes disease, and assumes that you can just aggregate up from individuals to understand populations. You see in different countries others who contest those ideas and have an understanding in some manner of social determinants of health in ecologic context. But I think what's particularly valuable is that my sense is that in the Latin American context, for a variety of historical and political reasons, there actually was an important bringing together of different perspectives and frameworks that became evident through the larger trend of Latin American social medicine. And I would agree that there are many in epidemiology in the United States that remain unaware of this very important trend, but there have been others who have been helping to try to make people aware of it and popularize it as part of informing a broader discussion on understanding the societal determinants of health. So I think that you can trace other work back in a course that I'm teaching right now on the history and politics of public health and theories of disease distribution and health inequity. We've just been looking at various theories in the 1930s, including some in the United States, that were also trying to put forward a social model, and then understanding why was there a setback. What did that have to do in part from the US vantage with the Cold War, and what happened to thinking about reductionism versus holism versus bringing out different kinds of biology. So it's very interesting to be looking at what happened in a variety of country contexts, and then to see the coalescence of what came together and became an organized force in different Latin American health research contexts around Latin American social epidemiology and critical epidemiology. So I think that if this work can continue to become more widely known, read, debated, and discussed among people in the global North, that would be very important, and is something I certainly see as an important role that I can help play and have been interested in doing in creating connections to Latin American epidemiologists. He here I'm acutely conscious that my ability to read in Spanish doesn't easily translate to speaking, which is why I'm speaking to you in English right now, and I appreciate your accommodating my deficiency here. But I think that there's a possibility of getting the work in a form that's accessible to people where English right now in the current moment remains the dominant scientific language. But it's not always been that way. If you went back to the 1400s in Europe, Arabic was the lingua franca of science, for example. So I think it's really important to see that right now there are linguistic issues of translation, but I think the ideas do translate. And that's why when I certainly expose students and colleagues to the very important work of Latin American epidemiologists, they gravitate to it very quickly and are glad to learn what the ideas are, and also to understand something about the historical moment in which they were forged, in terms of what it meant to have more repressive governments and what it was to understand health within that context. So I think that these are very, very important contributions, and that more discussion and debate and engagement is very much needed.
Okay, thank you. Well, this is the last question. What is, in your opinion, the importance of critical epidemiology in the innovation of research and public health policy? And what would be the main challenges and agenda for North-South and South-South islands in being consolidated in this Quito doctoral program encounter?
So, my understanding with critical epidemiology, as Jaime Braille has particularly developed it, is that it really does ask us to think about the processes, social, biological, and ecological, that are involved in shaping the health of populations at a given point in time and space. So it encourages a kind of multi-level thinking with attention to political interests at play. So it's not just multi-level, it's asking who's creating those levels, it's asking who benefits from certain arrangements of power and property and who is harmed. It's asking for understanding, which I think is very important compared to some of the other social epidemiology frameworks. There's an awareness of the ecological context, which is very important, particularly at this time of global climate change, and asking how do we live in a way that's not only more equitable, but also sustainable. And it's asking us to think about what are the questions we need to ask to understand how we can get to a more sustainable and equitable place in health. So I think these are all very important contributions. They're contributions conceptually, in terms of where we look for what's driving, who is driving the patterns of health and ill health that we see. They're asking it methodologically, what then are the ways that we actually measure some of these kinds of contexts? What are the instruments that we need to develop to get at the societal level factors, ways of characterizing them? And there is work being done, which I think critical epidemiology connects with, that's doing more cross-country comparisons of forms of government and policy, for example, to understand how those affect the population's health. It's asking also for engaging more with people that are involved in ecological sciences, that may not have a human focus per se, and yet how we're transforming the ecology matters also for people as well as for other species. So I think it's asking us to think about all these important questions and beginning to pose some directions for beginning to develop the methods to start to answer them. So that this really is about doing science. It's about testing ideas. It's about gaining evidence. It's about gaining new insights into what truly can be seen as modifiable. The context in which we live, the kinds of societies we have, are in fact modifiable, not just obviously by epidemiologists by themselves, but a truly social understanding of health means that epidemiologists need to be cognizant of the role we can play in understanding, diagnosing, and providing insights into those conditions, and understanding who we need to work with and bring the information to and hear the questions from, in order to figure out a better form of acting together to change society and context for the better.
Well, Nancy, again, thank you so much for your time and your valuable contribution. It is very important for us to have you here. It's a shame that you could not come, and it has to be done by Skype, but I'm sure that you will be soon with us here, and thank you so much.
And thank you, and I wish you all the best with this training program. I think it's wonderful that you're bringing people from different countries together, and I think that you're trying to form this critical mass to do critical thinking is a very important thing.